When my sister sneered those words in front of everyone, I felt my heart crack, not because of her insult, but because deep down, I once believed it myself. I had grown up hearing whispers that I was the family's pity project, a burden they took in out of obligation rather than love. My sister, Evelyn, was everything I wasn't: elegant, confident, born into privilege, and always the center of attention. I was the quiet one, the child who came from the orphanage after the accident that took my parents. To her, I was a reminder of imperfection in an otherwise flawless world. It was her engagement party, hosted at our family estate, a place where even the walls seemed to echo with superiority. The chandeliers glittered above us like fragments of ice, the guests dressed in gowns and tailored suits, sipping champagne and exchanging shallow compliments. I stood near the edge of the hall, dressed in my simple formal uniform, the one that still carried faint traces of the desert dust I could never quite wash away. My sister spotted me from across the room and smiled, a sharp, cruel smile that never reached her eyes. "Well, look who decided to show up," she said, her voice slicing through the music. "Our family's broken charity case." Laughter rippled through her circle of friends. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I stayed silent. The room blurred around me for a moment, faces melting into a sea of polite cruelty. I could have told them where I had been, what I had endured, how many lives I had held in my hands as they bled and begged to live. But what good would it have done? People like them wouldn't understand what sacrifice looked like unless it came wrapped in medals and headlines. My sister stepped closer, her perfume sweet and suffocating. "Still playing soldier?" she asked mockingly. "Or did they finally realize you weren't fit for much?" Her fiancé chuckled awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. I clenched my fists, not in anger, but to stop my hands from trembling. In her eyes, I was still the same unwanted child she grew up resenting. She didn't see the nights I spent carrying wounded comrades across broken terrain, or the mornings I woke up shaking from the screams of men I couldn't save. She didn't know that beneath my uniform was a chest full of scars, each one earned protecting others. I remembered the night I saved those men. It was chaos, fire lighting the sky, gunfire echoing through the hills. We had been ambushed, and my unit was pinned down. I could have stayed back, waited for backup, but I didn't. I ran into the storm of bullets again and again, dragging the wounded to safety. I didn't think of myself as a hero then. I just did what needed to be done. When it was over, 11 men were alive who wouldn't have been. 11 families would get to see their sons, husbands, and fathers again. That was what mattered to me, not recognition, not praise. But standing there in front of my sister, I realized how far she was from understanding that kind of value. The general had written to me personally after the incident. His letter was short, formal, and humble, but filled with gratitude. He said I had done something extraordinary, something beyond duty. I never showed that letter to anyone. It wasn't for pride, it was a private reminder that even broken people could do something whole. That letter was in my pocket that evening, folded neatly beside my dog tag, worn smooth from years of service. I touched it lightly as my sister continued her mockery, letting her words roll off me like distant thunder. The guests around us smiled politely, whispering behind crystal glasses. To them, this was entertainment, a spectacle of humiliation disguised as banter. I could see the judgment in their eyes, the same silent verdict they had given years ago, that I was an outsider trying to belong in a world that would never accept me. I wondered how many of them had ever faced real fear, or what it meant to hold someone's hand as their life slipped away. Probably none. Their world was measured in luxury, not loss. When my sister finally walked away, laughing with her friends, I stayed where I was, staring at the reflection of the chandeliers on the marble floor. I could still hear her voice in my head, sharp and cold, echoing the same label I had been branded with all my life. Broken. Charity case. Forgotten. But I wasn't broken. I was alive. I had seen the worst of humanity and still chosen compassion. I had carried the weight of others and still stood tall. That wasn't weakness, it was strength she would never comprehend. I left the party early, the sound of laughter fading behind me. The night air outside was cool, and I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs. Somewhere deep inside, I felt a calm resolve forming, not of anger, but of quiet dignity. I didn't need her approval or anyone else's. My worth wasn't measured by her standards. One day, the truth would surface, and when it did, her laughter would die in her throat. The general arrived unannounced, and the air in the grand hall shifted instantly. My sister, Evelyn, was glowing with excitement, certain he was there for her fiancé or perhaps to acknowledge her charitable donations to military families. She had always loved the idea of being admired for generosity she barely understood. The guests murmured with admiration as the tall, uniformed man stepped inside, his medals glinting under the chandelier's light. I stood at the back of the room, near the corner where no one noticed me. I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. After her earlier insult, I had decided to leave quietly, but something told me to stay a little longer. The general's eyes scanned the room, moving past the rows of polished shoes, designer dresses, and false smiles. There was purpose in his gaze, not the casual interest of a social guest. My sister approached him eagerly, holding out her manicured hand. "General, what an honor," she said with a rehearsed sweetness. He nodded politely, but his eyes didn't settle on her. They kept searching, sharp and deliberate, as if looking for someone lost in the crowd. Then, in a voice that carried the weight of command, he asked, "Where's the soldier?" The chatter stopped instantly. My sister blinked, confused. "Soldier," she repeated, tilting her head. "There must be some mistake. This is an engagement party." He ignored her tone and stepped further into the room. "I was told she'd be here," he said, scanning the faces. "The medic who pulled my men from the fire that night." His gaze finally landed on me. My breath caught. The general's eyes softened, recognition flickering across his face. "You," he said, pointing toward me. "You're the one." The room turned to stare. Whispers spread like sparks. I froze, unsure what to say. My sister's confusion turned to disbelief, then to a faint, nervous laugh. "Her?" she asked incredulously. "General, you must be mistaken. That's my sister, well, sort of. She's, not really." Her voice trailed off as he walked past her without a glance. The general stopped in front of me and extended his hand. His voice trembled slightly, heavy with emotion. "It's good to see you again," he said. "You saved 11 of my men. I never thought I'd get to thank you in person." My throat tightened, memories flashing through my mind, the night sky filled with explosions, the screams, the smell of smoke, the unbearable heat. I had tried to forget, but his words brought it all back. He reached for the chain around my neck, lifting my dog tag gently into the light. The silver tag gleamed, worn smooth from years of service. The general read my name aloud, each syllable deliberate and full of respect. "Corporal Lila Hayes," he said, his voice firm and proud. "The medic who carried my men through hell." The hall went silent, even the music had stopped. My sister's face drained of color as the general continued, speaking not just to me, but to everyone present. He recounted that night, the ambush, the chaos, the moment when the enemy fire was so intense that hope seemed impossible. "She ran into the line of fire," he said. "Not once, not twice, 11 times. Each time dragging one of my soldiers to safety. When I found her, she was covered in blood, refusing treatment until every man was accounted for. If not for her, those 11 families would have been burying their sons." No one moved. The guests who had laughed with my sister earlier now stood still, their eyes darting between the general and me. My sister's lips parted, but no words came out. The general's voice softened. "You called yourself a broken person that night," he said quietly. "But I want you to know, you're the reason I'm alive to say this. You're the reason 11 men got to go home." I could feel tears burning in my eyes, but I forced a small smile. I didn't know he had remembered me. I didn't know he had carried that night with him all these years. He straightened his uniform, then turned to face the room. "This woman," he said, "is not a charity case. She's a hero." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. I looked at my sister, who stood frozen, her hand clutching the stem of her champagne glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her fiancé looked away, unable to meet my eyes. For once, she had no words, no clever insult, no laughter. Her world of pretense and perfection had cracked open, and through it shone a truth she could never twist or deny. The general saluted me. I hesitated, then returned the gesture, though my hands trembled slightly. He smiled, nodded once, and said, "We owe you more than words." With that, he turned and left, leaving behind a silence thicker than any applause. As the doors closed behind him, the guests began to whisper again, this time in awe, not mockery. Some approached me hesitantly, murmuring apologies or words of respect. I could barely hear them. My eyes found my sister again. She tried to speak, but I walked past her quietly, each step feeling lighter than the last. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself or defend my worth. I didn't have to prove anything. The truth had spoken for me. Outside, the night was calm, the stars scattered across the sky like distant embers. I took out my dog tag and held it in my hand, feeling its cool weight. It wasn't just metal, it was a reminder of everything I had endured, everything I had survived. My sister's words no longer had power over me. I had been broken once, yes, but I had rebuilt myself piece by piece. I had saved lives, not for glory, but because it was right. And that was something no insult, no sneer, no arrogance could ever take away.